Good morning, everyone.
Ma'am.
So in the last class, we have discussed about the properties of wave. The properties are amplitude, wavelength, time period, frequency, and speed. So amplitude was the height of the wave, and wavelength is the distance traveled by one particle during one vibration. Uh, Students, my voice is clear or not?
Ma'am.
It is clear, right?
Yes, clear.
Okay. So wavelength was the distance traveled by one particle during one vibration, and time period is the time taken for the particle. Okay, the time period was the time taken by a particle. The time taken during one vibration is the time period. Time taken during one vibration, and frequency is the total number of vibration in 1 second, and speed is the velocity of the wave, which is determined by wavelength divided by frequency. So we can see that wavelength, time period, frequency, speed, these all are correlated. They all depends on each other. So now wavelength. So wavelength is denoted by lambda. This symbol is called lambda, and wavelength to determine. So wavelength wavelength is denoted by lambda. Okay. So the distance traveled by the disturbance during the time of one vibration by a medium particle is called wavelength lambda. So the distance traveled by one particle during one vibration is called the wavelength, or is called the wavelength of the particle. So wavelength can be different in different types of more different types of waves. The wavelength for transverse wave is different, and wavelength for longitudinal wave is also different. So in case of a transverse wave, the wavelength may be defined as the distance between two successive crests and troughs. So we know that in case of transverse wave, the particles of the medium vibrate in perpendicular direction of the wave, right? In perpendicular direction. So perpendicular direction means one it will go upward, then it will go downwards. Okay, if the wave is traveling horizontally, then once the particles of the medium goes upward, and once it will go downward during the time of its vibration. So when it will go up and down, crest mean when it will go up, and cross mean when it will go downward. So the total distance between two successive crest and cross are its wavelength in case of transverse wave. So this should be TWO2. Okay, in case of longitudinal wave, the wavelength lambda is equal to distance from center of one compression to another. So again we know that in case of longitudinal wave, the particles of the medium uh, vibrate along the direction of the wave. That means when if the wave is traveling horizontally, then once the particle of the medium goes up, goes forward, and once it will go downward, backwards. to and fro motion, which we call to and fro motion. Once it will go forward, then it will go backward. So during this time, when the particle go forward, we call it as expansion. When the particle goes backward, we call it as compression. So the distance from center of one compression to another is its wavelength in case of longitudinal wave. So these are the so first one is the definition of wavelength, the distance traveled by the disturbance during the time of one vibration by a particle of the medium is wavelength. So wavelength is different in case of different type of waves. So in case of transverse wave, the wavelength may also be defined as the distance between two successive crests and troughs, and in case of longitudinal wave, the wavelength is equal to distance from one center of compression to another. So since wavelength as a distance, we will measure wavelength in terms of meter. So the SI unit of wavelength is meter. Okay, so next topic is frequency. The number of vibration made by a particle in 1 second is called frequency. So total number of vibration in 1 second is the frequency. Frequency is denoted by nu. This symbol is called nu. This is not V, this is nu. Frequency is denoted by nu. The SI unit of frequency is hertz. The SI unit of frequency hertz. So the next topic is relationship between frequency and wavelength. So the time period of a wave can be defined as the time taken to complete a oscillation. So this is the definition of time period. I will not give the definition of time period separately. If question may come on this definition of time period, so you have to write down this line. The time period of a wave can be defined as the time taken to complete one oscillation. This is the definition of time period. Because frequency determines the number of times a wave oscillation in 1 second, it can be expressed as f equal to 1 by t. So we know that the time period is the time taken during one vibration, and frequency is total number of vibration in 1 second. Therefore we can define frequency f equal to 1 by t, f for frequency, t for time period. F equal to 1 by t or t equal to 1 by f. That means they both are inversely proportional to each other. When frequency increases, time period decreases. When time period increases, frequency decreases. They both are inversely proportional to each other. That is the relationship between time period and frequency. What is the relationship between time period and frequency? They both are inversely proportional to each other. Again, the wave velocity is defined as the distance traveled by the wave per unit time. The distance traveled by the wave per unit time. Unit means 1. So distance traveled in 1 second is the is the wave velocity. Distance traveled in 1 second is the wave velocity. So wave velocity or wave speed. So wave velocity is determined by wavelength divided by time period. Wave velocity, wavelength divided by time period. So what is the relationship between wave speed, wavelength and time period? Okay, What what is the relationship between wavelength, wave velocity, wavelength and time period? Students, please answer the question. Yes, no, something you should answer something na. তোমালোকে শুনা পাই আছা নে নাই নে এনেই জইন কৰি থৈ দিছা
শুনিছো মেম
তো কি ৰিলেশ্যনশ্বিপ হয় কোৱা ৱেভ ভেলচিটি ৱেভলেংথ আৰু টাইম পিৰিয়ডৰ ৰিলেশ্যনটো কোৱা লিখাই আছে চাই চাই ক'লেই হ'ল মানে কি তোমালোকক কি ইন্টাৰনেলত 0 মাৰ্কস লাগে নেকি তোমালোকে যে ক্লাছত একো ৰেছপন্ড নকৰা wave velocity equal to wavelength divided by time এইটো ক'লে এইটো হয় wave velocity equal to wavelength divided by time period you should respond to your teachers again time period equal to 1 by frequency 1 divided by frequency therefore if we put the value of time period in that equation v equal to lambda into f that is our relationship between frequency and wavelength that wave speed equal to frequency into wave speed equal to wavelength into frequency that is our required relationship between frequency and wavelength or if we say in terms of wavelength lambda equal to v by f or wavelength equal to wave speed divided by frequency. Therefore, the wave speed is equal to the product of its frequency and wavelength, and this implies the relationship between frequency and wavelength. So, if we take the wave speed as unit, that means if we take the wave speed as unit value, take the unit value of the wave velocity, it will be 1. That means lambda equal to 1 by f. So, 1 by f means wave speed, wavelength and frequency are inversely proportional to each other. Wavelength and frequency are inversely proportional to each other. When wavelength increases, frequency decreases. When wavelength decreases, frequency increases. Inversely proportional means when one product increases, the other one decreases. So the wave with the greatest frequency has the shortest wavelength. So this is your last topic of this chapter. Sound. Sound is also a wave. Sound is vibration that typically propagates as an audible wave of pressure through a transmission medium such as gas and liquid. So sound is also a wave that the name of sound waves is audible wave. So sound, as we know, all waves need some medium to travel. Okay, for the transmission of sound wave, it needs gas or liquid. So sound can travel through gas as in the air surrounding us, and through liquid. That means sound can travel through water also. The nature of sound wave is longitudinal wave in which the particles oscillate to and fro in the same direction of wave propagation. So we know that the definition of the longitudinal wave, in that type of wave the particles of the medium oscillate to and fro. So what is the nature of sound wave? Sound wave is a longitudinal wave. It cannot be transmitted through vacuum. The sound cannot be transmitted through vacuum. It needs a medium, and the medium should be gas or liquid. So the velocity of sound in air is 344 meter per second or 1.235 meter per hour. So this is the velocity of sound in air. You should remember that point. MCQ may come on this point. So okay, any question you can ask. No question, then give your attendance in the chat box.
Hello, ma'am.
Yes.
Ma'am, wavelength আৰু frequency ৰিলেশ্যনটো আৰু এবাৰ ক'বচোন।
Wavelength and frequency relation to whole wave speed is the product of wavelength and frequency. Wave speed is the product of wavelength and frequency. That is the relationship between frequency and wavelength. এইটোৰ ওপৰত 5 marks question আহিব পাৰে, so এইটো derivation আহিব পাৰে, so গোটেইটো যদি offline exam হয়, online exam হলেতো MCQ আহিব। So এইটো গোটেইটো মনত কৰি ল'বা কেনেকৈ আমি ৰিলেশ্যনশ্বিপটো উলিয়ালো। ইয়াত step by step দেখাই থোৱা আছে যে speed equal to wavelength divided by time period. If we put the value of time period in that place, that will be v equal to lambda into f. So that is the relationship between wavelength and frequency. They are the wave speed is the product of wavelength and frequency, and they are inversely proportional to each other. Wavelength and frequency are inversely proportional to each other. When wavelength increases, frequency decreases. When wavelength decreases, frequency increases. বুজি পাইছা নৱাজ?
Yes, ma'am.
Hello,
Yes.
ma'am.
Yes.
মানে এইটোৰ পৰা কোশ্চেন কেনেকৈ হ'ব?
এইটোৰ পৰা MCQ আহিব পাৰে। What is the relationship between wavelength and frequency? What is the relationship between frequency and time period? What is the relationship between wave velocity and time period? এইকেইটা যিকেইটা ইকুৱেশ্যন আছে সেইকেইটা ৰিলেটেড MCQ আহিব। Then if যদি offline exam হয়, then এইটো derive কৰিব দিব পাৰে। 5 marks question আহিব পাৰে যদি offline exam হয়। নহলে এইটোতো অনলাইন এবাৰতো আৰু কলেজ খোলাৰ আশা কম আছে বহুত। তো অফলাইন এক্সাম হল অনলাইন এক্সাম হলে MCQ আহিব চব। তো যিকেইটা ইকুৱেশ্যন আছে সেইকেইটা ভালদৰে মনত কৰি থবা।
মেম 1 তাৰিখৰ পৰা খোলা চান্স নাই নেকি?
খোলাৰ চান্সটো আছিলে, কিন্তু কি হয় যে আমাৰ বেছিভাগ ষ্টুডেণ্টে আউট অফ এক্সাম হৈ যায় ন, সেইবিলাকতো আহিব নোৱাৰে। তো আশাটো বহুত কমেই আছে যে খুলিব 1 তাৰিখৰ পৰা। চাও কি হয়। Okay, all of you gave your attendance in the chat box and then you can leave. Okay, thank you everyone.
Thank you, ma'am.